Okay, hello, good afternoon, let's start. So today we're carrying on with Dretske on misrepresentation, and we'll wrap up on misrepresentation on Friday. Okay, so I want to begin by just going over where we ended last time on magnetosomes, and then into what's kind of a basic problem for Dretske's approach, the indeterminacy of function, and Dretske's solution to that approach, which has to do with multiple roots and associative learning. And then finally I'll raise another problem for Dretske's approach. But just to say first what the approach was, he has this example. Marine bacteria have internal magnets, magnetosomes. Why it does them good to have a magnetosome seems to be it allows the bacteria to move into deeper water. They move towards magnetic north. Moving towards magnetic north generally takes you into deeper water, and they need water that's oxygen-free. That's kind of a datum. They obviously do need water that's oxygen-free. So here you can see two marine biologists looking for magnetosomes in Norway. I hope that helps. There you go. That's what it I take it that this here is full of marine bacteria. And this is what they're catching, something like this, with the magnetosome being that strip there. Now, this is clearly a very primitive animal. You and I might look at such an animal and in our superior way say, huh, that's pretty primitive, not as sophisticated as me. And you might say, how can my thought and language be possibly modeled by such a simple creature? And that's right. That is the basic question for Dretske's approach. The thing is, what is engaging about this example is that there does seem to be some sense in which you want to say the magnetosome is for something, it has some point. So that you get some notion of right and wrong going for the magnetosome. And then if you think about human beings, I guess the Dretske program is, if you think about human beings, well, the human brain is very complicated. But when you break it down, there are things in vision that alert you to when something is moving fast. There are systems in vision that alert you to when something red is present. There are all these little things like, as it were, small magnetosomes in your visual system, in your perceptual systems generally. There are just ways of picking up on different features of the world around you. And in fact, maybe it's like that for the whole brain. Maybe what you have is something that's just a lot more of the same. It's not fundamentally different in kind. It's evolved mechanisms for detecting one or another aspect of your surroundings. And maybe that's all language is. It's a device for picking up on those millions of systems you have for detecting one or another aspect of your surroundings, and then telling other people about those aspects that you've detected. So, although this is very simple, the idea is maybe it gives us a model for human thought and language. Maybe it gives us the kind of building block that if we just stack enough of those together, we will get human thought and language out at the other end. And straight off, there are two questions I think you might have about this. One is that there's a kind of flexibility and learning that human thought seems to be capable of, that this animal isn't going to be capable of. I mean, this is just so simple. And isn't that flexibility and learning in our thinking, isn't that essential to the way it works? And another question is, could we really understand the concept of truth and falsity that we have for ordinary language on the basis of this kind of simple model? It's a very engaging question because many people would say we must be able to do that. Humans are biological evolved creatures. Thinking and language are biological evolved systems. They must consist in stuff like this, all stacked together. So the model is, this is Dretske's definition of functional meaning again. You remember Dretske's definition of functional meaning? You remember Dretske? We all remember Dretske. Okay, the magnetosomes pointing north functionally means that sorry, let me retake that. The magnetosomes pointing straight ahead means that geomagnetic north is straight ahead. That means something like the function of the magnetosome pointing straight ahead is to indicate where magnetic north is. Right? That all right? That's just reading out the definition of functional meaning. What you would say it takes for the magnetosome to have that functional meaning. And the magnetosome does that in part by indicating that geomagnetic north is straight ahead by pointing straight ahead. And when you look at the needs of the bacteria, you can see that the magnetosome has the function of indicating the direction of oxygen-free water. So given those things about function and indication, you can get what it means when you say the magnetosomes pointing straight ahead means that the geomagnetic north is straight ahead. Yeah? So we've explained meaning in terms of indication and function. Yeah? So then once we've explained meaning that way, we've got misrepresentation. Because now, when you hold a magnet over the bacteria, you lure them to your deaths and you say, ha-ha, fooled you. You got it wrong. Okay, so and that was a satisfying kind of note that we ended on last time, right? Okay, is that kind of plain where Dretske is? How it's meant to work? Okay. There is a kind of basic problem for this approach. It comes up in a lot of ways, but I said when we're talking about assigned functions, the functions that dials and meters have, these are functions that they have in virtue of our language or what we want them to do, what we think we like them to do, something like that. And so if you have something that's got a function, it can have that function because of our wants, because of what we say is going to be used for. And if that's what's going on, if that's where the function comes from, then that's not going to help us in explaining what the basis of meaning is. But Dretske's idea was, let's not explain function in terms of wants and what we say the thing is for. Let's explain function by anchoring it down to the needs of the organism. The system has a function if it's serving some need of the organism. That's the really basic move in Dretske. This is the same move that people were making about the pumping of the function of the heart being to pump blood, right? It has that function because that's the need of the human being that it serves to pump blood. So a connection between function and need there. The basic problem for Dretske is that this doesn't quite work, this approach. If you just say what need the system has, that doesn't uniquely pin down what function the system has. And if you don't have an account of function, then you don't yet have an account of what it takes for there to be malfunction, so you don't have an account of right and wrong. Yeah, it's really basic that we be able to connect need to function and have that uniquely pinned down, right and wrong. just to illustrate, suppose those bacteria, those marine bacteria that we last saw in Denmark or Norway or wherever it is, suppose those marine bacteria are captured and we take them to the South Pacific and their magnetosomes lead them north, which in the South Pacific takes them to the water that is full of oxygen. You following me? Yeah, I mean, that's the kind of thing you'd expect to happen, right? In the northern hemisphere, following geomagnetic north takes you to oxygen-free water. In the southern hemisphere, let's suppose, following geomagnetic north takes you to water that's full of oxygen and kills the bacteria. If that happens, the bacteria have been taken north by the magnetosome. Has that been a malfunction of the magnetosome? We know what need the magnetosome is serving, but has the magnetosome malfunctioned there? Did the bacterium get it wrong in that case? Can you put up your hand if your hunch is the bacterium got it wrong? If the bacterium got it right, one person, what about if the bacterium got it right in that situation? Okay, it's 1 vote for and 1 against, 2 against, right. Let me restate the problem. We know what the bacteria need, right? They need water that doesn't have a lot of oxygen in it. That's okay? And this magnetosome has got something to do with taking them away from such water with a lot of oxygen in it. They want water without oxygen. That's all right? Okay. So the magnetosome works because it lines up with the geomagnetic fields of the Earth and takes the bacterium to geomagnetic north. But then if we take the bacterium to a different area and following the magnetosome takes it to geomagnetic north, all right, but into oxygen-free, oxygen-rich water, then has the magnetosome malfunctioned or not? Can you put your hand up if you think the answer is yes, it's malfunctioned? 1, if it's no, it has not malfunctioned, it's done just fine. Most of you think it's not malfunctioned. If you understand the question perfectly well, but you have no idea what the answer is, can you put your hand up? Okay, thank you. Okay, that's good. Okay, I should have asked that the first time. Right. Okay, I think it's genuinely hard to know. Right? I mean, it's not that I know the right answer to this. I think it's very hard to say. There are 2 takes you could have, and they seem to me equally defensible. You could say the magnetosome got it wrong. The magnetosome is kind of like the speedometer in a car, and what it's saying is, hey, the oxygen-free water, the magnetosome is saying, hey, the oxygen-free water is over there, straight ahead. If that's what the magnetosome is saying, then it got it wrong, and it malfunctioned. On the other hand, you might say, no, that's not what the magnetosome is saying, and that's presumably what most of you think. The magnetosome is saying, this way's geomagnetic north, and the bacterium is saying, so that way is geomagnetic north, is it? Well, since geomagnetic north is where the oxygen-free water is, I'll go over there to my death. So all that went wrong in that reading is the magnetosome worked fine, but the bacterium just went wrong because the functioning of the bacterium usually depends on this contingency that the oxygen-free water is to the north. So there are these 2 different readings you could have as to what the function of the magnetosome is. You could say the function of the magnetosome is to indicate the direction of oxygen-free water, or you could say the function of the magnetosome is to indicate geomagnetic north. And just saying function is tied to need doesn't let you answer that question. Because although you know the need is to get oxygen-free water, and you know that the magnetosome is helping discharge that need, there are 2 different ways you could say it's doing that. You could say the organism's doing it either by indicating where the oxygen-free water is directly. Or you could say, no, the magnetosome fulfills that need by telling the organism where geomagnetic north is. Since geomagnetic north is correlated with oxygen-free water, that's how the need is being served by this system. And you can't really, it seems to me there's no way of differentiating the two. I mean, either way, the system, the magnetosome, is serving that need, but it could be serving that need by having either of two quite different functions. So tying function to need does not let you uniquely specify what function the thing has. Yep.
In the first case, is it even possible for there to be a malfunction? I mean, if the magnetosome is just kind of like a physical magnet, then it's just going to react to geomagnetic north wherever it is.
That's right, yeah.
So the first part.
How could it ever get things wrong? Yeah. Well, remember the evil scientist with a bar magnet, right? You know, when you right, when you I mean, some people kick the dog. You know, I maltreat bacteria. So you lean over and you do that. Then it's getting it wrong about where geomagnetic north is.
But then I think we would say that A is actually not to indicate geomagnetic north, but to indicate the nearest, strongest, to go towards a certain polarity, which in that case it would just be the closer magnet.
Is function? So you might even say, its function is not to indicate geomagnetic north. Its function is not to indicate where the oxygen-free water is. Its function is to indicate local magnetic north. And the way it works is that local magnetic north usually lines up with geomagnetic north, which usually lines up with where the oxygen-free water is, which is why that helps the animal. But now there are three different candidates for the function of the system. Yeah, and if you've got that last function to indicate local magnetic north, then it's hard to see how the system could be making a mistake. That's the point.
Yeah, I guess where's the line that we're drawing is to because if you can understand geomagnetic north in terms of indicate G, or also in the way you just explained it, where it's to indicate local magnetic north, which usually then you can understand it in both A or B circumstances.
Yeah.
And then where are we drawing the line as to what something that can only be to indicate G?
That's right. Yeah, and we're losing the idea that there's such a thing as getting it wrong here. That was where you began, right? Because whatever it does, you say, well, that's its point, to do that. Yeah. Now we don't know what it means that it's getting things wrong. So we're even losing where right and wrong come from. So there are two problems, right? One is indeterminate what the function is, just given a specification of the need. And the second problem is we now don't know what right or wrong are anyway. Yeah. So that was your point, right? You could say the function of the magnetosome is to indicate local magnetic north. And then you could say, even in the case in which I think, this is like the bacterium's revenge, right? You say, you didn't fool me. I was only thinking that local magnetic north was over there. And I was right, right? You see what I mean? Yeah. So this is the bacterium's revenge. And the problem is not any mistake the bacterium made. The problem was just that in its actions, it usually relies on that correlation between local magnetic north and oxygenated water. And that correlation just broke down. But that wasn't a mistake it made. It was still getting it right. Yeah, so it sucks to the human intelligence. Yeah.
Can you say that they're using the machinery wrong?
Exactly. That would be the idea. The machinery was working just fine. It's like in your car, if you use your speedometer to figure what, if you're in a manual car and you use your speedometer to figure what gear you should be in, yeah, the speedometer might be telling you just the right things, getting the speed completely right, But you just use it wrong. You go into the wrong gear. It would be like that. Is that a good analogy for what you had in mind? The machinery's fine. Is that what you meant? The magnetosome is the machinery? Sorry? It's like trying to drive a car when you're underwater.
Yeah,
Right.
that's not
Right. That's right. Yeah, yeah. Yeah, that's right. So it's not it's not even a mistake in the driver exactly. It's just the wrong context to be trying to use a car. Yeah, so if you move it into the South Pacific, that would be like that situation. I wouldn't want to be trying to drive that kind of machine down here, something like that. Yeah, yeah. That's interesting. What would you say in that kind of case? Would you say that the dials in the car are getting it right, or the dials in the car are getting it wrong? Or do you just want to say all the bets are off if it's in the wrong context? Okay. It's not the right context. Yeah. So that's a further possibility. I agree that possibility is not on the map here. But the notion, your idea is you can only talk about the function of the thing relative to a particular context. And if you move it out of that context, there is no saying what's right and wrong anymore, what the function of the thing is anymore. Yeah, that would be a different move. Yeah, and that too is possible. Yeah. Yep. Yep. Sorry.
Just want to expound on that a little bit,
Yep.
because I think something's really right about it. In that when we have something, even in human life, that we use for a specific purpose, for instance,
Yeah.
in sciences we use specific equations for
Right.
within a certain range of measurement, like
Right.
Newtonian mechanics acts on
Yeah, for mid-range speeds and so on. Yeah, yeah.
relativity acts on these really long distances and high speeds. It's not that we say these Newtonian equations get it wrong on the relativistic
Right.
scale. It's just that they just don't even apply there. It's just
Right. Yeah.
just a completely crazy situation to try to use them.
Right. Yeah, that's good too. I mean, I guess. So what's the I'm just trying to think. This is fair enough. So how do we spell out the implications of that for Dretske's framework? The point is the connect between needs and function. So I guess we can say whatever context it's in, it doesn't matter what context it's in, the bacterium needs oxygen-free water. Right, that's all right. That's context independent. Right? But what we can say is that the magnetosome, well, what would you say? The magnetosome has the function of getting it oxygen-free water, but only in a particular context. I guess that would be a way of defending the idea that the magnetosome is not making a mistake. Its function was only to indicate its function was to indicate oxygen-free water in the context of a Norwegian fjord, right? Something like that, and take it out of that context, and there's no saying what the function of the magnetosome is anymore. Yeah, something like that is the idea. Yeah, so it could still be getting it. Yeah, it could have that function of indicating geomagnetic north, even though it's not making a mistake in the bar magnet case. Oh, sorry, it could have. I put that wrong. It could have the function of indicating oxygen-free water, even though it's not making a mistake in the South Pacific. It's just that in the South Pacific, all bets are off because it's in the wrong context. That would be another diagnosis of what's happening here. Yeah, and I think so far we don't have any way of knowing how to use these distinctions. I mean, these are all good distinctions. You know, if we're going to have a proper account of how human brain systems represent, we need those distinctions. But we don't know how to bring them to bear in this case. Maybe we can't. Yeah, but we will need them eventually. Yeah, in a proper accounting meaning. So the general problem is that whenever you get something, whenever you get some external factor that causes the system to go into some state, you can say the function of the system is to represent that factor. And what's going on is that it needs genus, and there's a correlation between fness and genus. So if you think about human vision, you could say, well, the function of some cell firings is to indicate the presence of square objects out there. But you could equally say, no, the function of those cell firings is to indicate a certain type of retinal projection. All your brain's ever telling you about is a condition of your retina. And you can say, well, but there are these correlations between particular kinds of configuration in your retina and the squareness out there, and you just exploit those. Yeah, we need to know what the visual system is representing. I mean, we think when you see, you're seeing the people around you. But if someone says, no, the function of vision is not to represent the people around you, the function of vision is just to tell you what's going on with your own retina, we need a way of saying why that's not the right answer. So the danger is we don't know what's being represented, and if you push it to the limit, as that question from the front said, then you've lost the possibility of misrepresentation altogether. Anytime something causes you to go into a particular state, you say, yeah, the function of this system is to be caused by that thing. Okay, so that's a problem for Dretske. Okay, plain enough what the problem is. That doesn't go away, incidentally. That just, I will tell you Dretske's solution in a moment, but there's a whole flourishing literature on this problem about indeterminacy of function. Because the thing is, Dretske's thing doesn't just come out of the blue. This is a very intuitive idea. And if you're at all scientifically minded in your approach to language and meaning, then most people think something like Dretske's approach must be right. You know, what else could it be? How else could it be happening that we're getting right and wrong in language and meaning in the biological world? But then this is a really basic problem about indeterminacy of function. The puzzle is, which one's the magnetosome representing? Is it where the oxygen-free water is? Is it where geomagnetic north is? Is it where local magnetic north is? We don't know which. Dretske's idea is this problem is actually insoluble for a creature as simple as the magnetosome. It actually becomes solvable only when you're considering creatures that are a little bit more complicated. I said one big difference between the bacterium and us is that we seem to have a kind of flexibility and a capacity to learn that the bacterium lacks. And Dretske's idea is that really is important here. So as a first softening up, suppose you're considering something just a little bit more complicated than the bacterium. Suppose you're considering something that has two different ways of finding the oxygen-free water. Then what happens is that it's got a magnetosome, right? And that fires that central structure S. We're wondering what S represents. And it's got a light detector. And the light detector fires structure S. So the magnetosome is one thing it uses to get to oxygen-free water. And that light detector is something it uses to get to oxygen-free water, because the oxygen-free water, let's suppose, is in the dark. So this takes it to the dark, right? Well then, if that's the situation, if the S is being fired in both these ways, could we say the function of S is to indicate where local magnetic north is? Could we say the function of S is to indicate where local magnetic north is? No, because it fires in response to this thing about light, right? So it doesn't, even if there is no local magnetic north, this light detector will still take it into the dark. Yeah, even if we set it up in a situation in which there's no magnetic field at all, it'll still go into the dark. Yeah.
Why are they both S? S1, S2?
Well, this is just the way it's working. That there's a single structure. There's a single structure in the bacterium, and the magnetosome is hooked into this structure, and the light detector is hooked into this structure. So suppose it's just a single cell. Yeah. So it fires. It goes, woodloop, woodloop, right, right. So if the magnetosome is orienting straight ahead, let's suppose, the cell goes woodloop, woodloop, and if the light detector is saying the dark is straight ahead, it does that thing, right? So it does the same thing, right? So when it does that, it's the same thing both times, right? That's why it's S both times, yeah? And now we're asking, what is S representing? What's the function of S? And we say, well, it can't be that the function of S is just to find where local magnetic north is. Because S fires even if there's no local magnetic north, but dark is straight ahead. Yeah. So once there's two, we have a start on reducing the indeterminacy about what the function of the system is, what it's representing. Now we have less indeterminacy. Now we know it's not local it's not local magnetic north, and indeed it's not geomagnetic north. Yeah, because it will fire to the dark. I mean, why would it be firing to the dark if it was geomagnetic north it was interested in? Yeah. So there you go. We've solved it. What's wrong? You know, why don't you believe you've solved it? I'm sorry, you shook your head. What?
Shouldn't the function just be local or geomagnetic north or dark?
Yeah, there's that. Yes, that is.
Function every thing you add on just gets another disjunction.
That is possibly the one weak spot in the argument. Yes.
That's pretty terrible.
Yes. I think that's a fair assessment. Actually, right. Okay. So what I said was the structure can't be indicating just local magnetic north or just the direction of the light. So you've got this kind of situation where you have two routes. For some reason, this has changed from R to S, from S to R, I mean. But when I say S, what I mean is R, if you see what I mean. Or rather, when I say R here, what I mean is S. You know what I mean, right? I mean this one. Okay, and there's the external thing, and these are the two routes to getting this to fire from, say, where the oxygen-free water is, right? And that one goes via the magnetic thing, and this one goes via the light thing. Okay, but as you said, you could say S is indicating either one or the other. It might be the bacterium thinks, these two are just great. We love local magnetic north, and we love the dark. So the great thing about this system is I always know it's giving me one or the other. Yeah? And you might say, oh, well, okay, if we added in a third thing, then you'd know it couldn't be giving you just A or B there. You see what I mean? If we added in, there's something about noise, for example. Maybe it's quieter in the deep. You see what I mean? Or maybe the pressure is higher in the deep and it uses that. Then you could say, well, it's not this. It's not just either local magnetic north or the direction of the light, because it also responds to pressure. And it also responds to, what was the other thing I said? Noise, to lack of noise. So that would solve it. I said that would solve it. It wouldn't solve it. Well, why not? It would make it harder to trick it. It would make it harder to trick it. But it wouldn't make it impossible. The thing is, being able to trick it is good, because then we know it's got something wrong. You see what I mean? The great danger here is we're going to wind up there being no such thing as tricking it. Yeah, but that's okay. So we want to make it hard to. I mean, it's going to be pleased if it's hard to trick it. That may be why it has these multiple roots. But so long as it's not impossible, we're home. So if we just make it 3 or 4, we're done, right? We're not done. Why aren't we done? Just please spell it out. Why aren't we done?
Because it uses add another or.
Right.
Ors, or 3 ors.
That's right. Okay.
Too many ors.
Very good. So I can just tag in, or where it's quiet, or where the pressure is high. Right? And if I say, oh, well, okay, I can add a 5th, then I beat these 4, right? But then you just come and add a 5th, right? And in fact, anything that makes a structure fire, I'm going to be able to add that in. Yeah. So this is really bad news. So Dretske's idea is, suppose you've got something that's capable of learning. Suppose you've got something that's capable of associative learning, so that there can be new ways of making the structure fire. It can learn new ways of finding out where the oxygen-free water is. Then if it can keep learning new ways, then so long it has that potential for learning, then there's not going to be, I mean, it's a finite creature, so it will only have finitely many routes to making the structure fire at any one time, right? So there's always just going to be 1, 2, 3, 4, some finite number of ways it can make the structure fire. But since it's capable, to be capable of learning is just the same thing as having the capacity to add new routes. So if you say, well, I've just, you built it up to 5, but what I, in my smug way, did is just put in 5 ors, right? Then I can say, yes, but this animal has the potential to add a 6th. It's not done it yet, but it has that potential to add a 6th. So the 5 can't be right. And you say, but then I can just add or the 6th. But I can beat that too, because it has the potential to add a 7th. And in fact, since it's capable of associative learning, there is no finite n. I mean, you're not going to be able to make a catalogue of the possible new ways it could learn. There are going to be endlessly many ways, new things it could add on. And you can't rule out any of them. So since it has that potential, what the thing is firing to can't be identified with any finite disjunction, because it's got that potential there to add something else on that you hadn't thought of in giving you disjunction. If it did it, you could add another one, right? But the thing is, when suppose you do it, right? You've now got 6 pathways, right? And now you've said that's it, right? Then you've got something that hasn't got the capacity to add a 7th. I mean, the structure, you've got, let me put it another way. Suppose you had an animal that had no learning capacity. Yeah? The description you gave would fit that animal perfectly. Right? Because it's just got this 6 roots and that's it, and it stops there. Yeah? The animal we're describing is not like that. It's good. There's no bound on which new routes it can learn. So its its capacity, the way its system is working, is not captured by any finite disjunction like that, because it's always got that basis that can take it beyond any finite systematization like that. Yeah.
Why couldn't I have two destructions? One, like, when it has 1 and 2, right?
Yeah.
And then what if it decides to develop a new one, then I just add another destruction in there. Now I have 3.
Yeah. Yeah. But you're always having to run after to catch up here. The animal's got something that you are not describing, which is this capacity to learn. The idea is this capacity to learn is should be thought of as an intrinsic part of the system. Yeah. 1, 2.
Just the fact that, like, the still will start firing in response to X when it's in the presence of oxygen free water
Yeah.
means more than that it's just trying to detect X.
Right.
So it's not just a destructive statement because it doesn't only look for X, it only looks for X if X is present in oxygen free water.
Very good. Okay, that goes beyond what I was saying. The associative learning mechanism must have an independent way of detecting oxygen-free water, right? Even if it's just by dying or not dying, if you see what I mean. It's going to have some way of getting onto the oxygen-free water, it must have some teaching signal. And that in itself, when you go deeper into how the associative learning is working, will give a basis for saying it's going beyond any of these proximal things. Yeah. Yep. So yes, you. Yeah. Yeah. Right. Okay. Yeah. I agree. That's actually better than what I was saying. I was saying my opponent can't win by giving a finite list, because that has the basis for going beyond any finite list you give, and you're not going to catch that in the finite list. That's what I was saying. You're both saying you can do better than that. You can say, think about what that basis for the possibility of learning new associative learning of new connections will look like, and you'll see that just by looking at that basis, you go beyond the finite list. Is that?
Yeah, but I mean, isn't that problematic now? Like, I guess by sort of saying that this is sequential, like, presupposing, I guess, the existence of something that, it's kind of hard to isolate the pictures. Never mind, I think we should keep going. I'll see if it comes up.
I think it is. Okay, I'm sympathetic. I think there are difficulties about seeing exactly how this is going to work. Yeah, but at any rate, you see what the problem is that Dretske is appealing to associative learning to help with. Yeah, the problem is this issue about just having a disjunction of wrong answers, as it were, to the question, what's the function of this thing? And the solution being proposed is that when you think about associative learning, you get beyond any finite disjunction. Let me put it another way. It's a finite disjunction. Is that you know what I mean when I say a finite disjunction? Yeah. It's a finite disjunction of proximal states. So S1 or S2, states that are closer than what you want intuitively. Yeah. You see, it's a finite disjunction of these proximal states. But the point that that's being made is for the associative learning to work, it must have a teaching signal that is responding directly to the distal stimulus. Yeah, and that's why it can be said to be representing that. And the thing about going beyond any finite disjunction is to say no finite disjunction of proximal stimuli will catch the endless possibility of learning new pathways from the distal stimulus as ways of picking up in the presence of the distal stimulus. Okay? This is your chance if you're not comfortable with that. As I say, I think this problem re-emerges. We'll come on to that on Friday. See, there's something very intuitive about what Dretske is doing here, because when you, as I said to begin with, when you think about why the magnetosome might not be a good model for human thought and talk, one simple thing is it seems so basic to human thought and talk that we can learn in a way the magnetosome can't. And Dretske's thing really gives that an interesting theoretical role. It puts that right at the center of the account of how it's representing in the first place. So the idea there is to be representing F, you've got to be capable of learning any number of new ways of detecting Fness. And then if you are capable of learning any number of new ways of detecting Fness, then it's determinate that you're representing F rather than anything else. Okay, I want to just quickly raise a last problem. Dretske is saying the standards of right and wrong for sentences are explained in terms of the biological functions of physical states. That's a strategy, right? That's what we're going to get to. But it's possible to wonder whether the standards of right and wrong for ordinary language are really going to be captured like this. I mean, what we're doing is we're talking about the biological functions of physical states. Well, suppose you think about, there actually are some studies on this where you ask people, how popular are you? Do you think you are? How well do you think? How many people do you think well of you, and so on? And then you ask everybody's friends, how popular do you think this person is? And there's a kind of basic finding that if you're going to be happy, there has to be a mismatch between your estimate of your popularity and everybody else's estimate of your popularity. That happiness is correlated with you having a higher view of your own popularity than everyone else does. Having a realistic estimate of your own popularity is correlated with unhappiness. You might as well know this. Okay. Now, suppose you think about your opinions as to your, suppose that's right, suppose you think about your opinions as to your own popularity then. You can see how that might be adaptive to have false beliefs about your own popularity. Right? It might be that there's a strong selection value for that. In that case, the analog of a magnetosome here is something that indicates level of popularity to me. But the level of when that thing's functioning right, it's telling me that I'm more popular than I am. Its biological function is to generate an illusion. Yeah? Adaptiveness is one thing, and truth or falsity are another. There's a famous experiment where people were asked to play a video game, and there's lots of stuff going on in the screen in the game. And the experimenters, you're given a joystick so you can play, and the experimenters could vary how much control the player had over what was going on in the screen. And they asked people to estimate how much control they had over what was going on in the screen. And if you imagine that situation, of course, everybody exaggerates wildly their own control over what's going on. You know, you look at the joystick, you look at the screen, you think, yes, I'm making that happen. I'm making that happen. Whereas you may have very little control, right? So people naturally assume they've got a lot of control over what's going on. That there was only one group of subjects who reliably got it right about about how much control they had over what was going on the screen. Do you have a guess as to which population that might be? Depressives. You know this? Yeah. It was the depressives, right? The depressives got it exactly right, how much control they had over what was going on. What? The depressives were the ones who understood exactly how much control they had over what was happening. Yeah. So you can see that this could be adaptive to exaggerate your control over what's going on. That your biologically, it will be helpful to you if you always think, I can make a difference to this situation or to that situation. It will mean you don't give up. It will mean you keep trying. Yeah, hopeless though it might be. It might not be adaptive to have correct estimates as to how likely you are to succeed or how much control you have. The general point here is that the biological systems that generate beliefs might not be designed to deliver truths. They might be designed to repress unpleasant facts. Right? Your biology might be protecting you. And in general, this is the way Fodor puts it, there's no guarantee that when you're talking about the optimality of biological function, that's going to be the same thing as the optimality of truth. I mean, truth is a good thing. The truth of a sentence is in some sense a good thing. A biological system fulfilling its function is a good thing. But that's no reason to think it's the same thing. Truth and falsity might be one thing, and fulfilling your function might be a quite different thing. The function might be to generate falsehoods. And Dretske's kind of approach just collapses these two things. It says what the magnetosome is representing and fulfilling its biological function, that's just the same thing. Okay, that's the end of the message for today. Thank you.